All right. Jake, how's it going? Good morning to you.
Good morning, Pierre. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm stressing to publish the links here so people can join us this morning. Yeah, but yes, a beautiful Friday morning here in Malta. We have 25 degrees, sunshine, and there was someone funny mentioned yesterday. I was in a meeting with a Swedish person, with Lynn of Quickspin, and she said the summer has arrived here in Sweden. Now we can finally open the windows. And it's funny because in Malta it's the complete opposite, because here when the summer arrives we close the windows and we don't open them for 3 months because it just gets way too hot here. But how's
Get
it
the air
over in the
conditioning.
UK?
It's good. It's good. It's a momentous day for me, actually, Pierre.
Oh,
So
really?
after 2.5 years of working from home now, including
Yes.
the last sort of 8 months with iGaming Next, this is the first
Yes.
day in my own remote working office. How exciting is that?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's amazing. It's
It might not be
it's
exciting for you, but it's exciting for me, let me tell you.
yeah. I can totally relate to it. I mean, it's a lot of brownie points, a lot of grown-up points for that, adult points.
Yeah, you're right. And also, what an achievement assembling a 28-piece desk all by myself with a screwdriver. What I will say is that it actually came from a company in Germany, and I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you as a Swede, because everybody says, IKEA is the way to go for flat pack
Yeah.
furniture, but I've got to say the Germans, with their efficiency, this manual, it was a pleasure to read the instruction manual.
Really?
Yeah,
I
I've got
think
it up in no time.
I mean, I think the point with IKEA is kind of that it's supposed to be an IQ test, and you're supposed to feel
Yeah.
a bit of an achievement after assembling this like little mini. It feels like you're assembling a little mini rocket or something every time you put together an IKEA thing. But yeah, maybe we have to
No.
look out then for the Germans if we are outcompeted.
If Nico was
Essentially.
here, I'd give him a pat on the back, because it was a
Yeah.
great experience all around.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Uh, and so on top of assembling very complex desks, moving into new office spaces here at home, there's been another interesting week of the iGaming industry, of course, and that's what we are going to talk about mainly today. A lot of things ahead of us here, Jake, this hour that we have, and just to summarize a little bit on the agenda ahead here, what we're going to talk about today is Stake.com have signed a really another major shirt sponsorship deal with Everton, the biggest shirt sponsorship deal for Everton in their club's history, essentially. What's interesting with Stake.com is they are continuing this very aggressive marketing drive, essentially. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. And but I think the main news story today is, I think we can both agree, is the fact that LeoVegas has been visited by the Swedish Economic Crime Unit. The police essentially have searched their offices in connection to the recent bid that MGM announced to acquire LeoVegas. Possible insider trading happening over there. So we're going to talk about that a bit. Another really interesting story related to the US side of the pond is the fact that Las Vegas Sands, the biggest gambling company in the world, have announced the next investment into the online gambling sphere, which is a company called Huddle. I know, Jake, you obviously have more insight into this company, but the more interesting topic in relation to the announcement of the investment in Huddle is the fact that Las Vegas Sands seems to kind of dabble their feet in M&A activity within the iGaming industry. They are focusing on kind of smaller targeted investments rather than major M&A activity, which I think kind of everyone expected from Las Vegas Sands. And we will talk a little bit about that today. Another interesting story is the fact that Kindred finally got granted the license in the Netherlands, which caused the share price to jump 10% on the news, which I felt personally was a bit of an overreaction. And let's go into the details of that as well. And then I suppose a name that hasn't escaped anyone in the world of Instagram celebrities and influencers is Dan Bilzerian, our very own poker cowboy, who has been ousted as an ambassador for GG Poker in quite kind of true to Dan Bilzerian's image, a bit controversial stories and happening around that fact, essentially. And finally, as well, the trial against the former MGA employees Jason Ferrugia and Joseph Galea continues here, which has been a quite damning and a reputation damaging trial against the MGA. And Phil Pearson, he wrote a quite interesting piece here, like kind of who is monitoring the watchdog, at this stage, because the MGA is no stranger to this type of activity. And we're going to give a little bit of an update on that front as well. How does that sound, Jake?
It sounds pretty good to me. I mean, I can do another hour on my new desk if you like, but no, I think that the viewers would probably prefer it if we concentrate on these gaming topics. And yeah, I think Phil Pearson's piece was called "Who Will Guard the Guards," and you can read that on the iGaming Next website. It was a good little opinion piece he wrote for us. So thanks, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing first, I mean, good morning as well to the people joining us here in the chat. As always, we are live here, me and Jake. We're putting ourselves out there. So if there's any corrections or questions or insults perhaps that you want to give us, then feel free. Although, with the immaculate glasses and ironed shirts that Jack is wearing, I can't see how that is possible today. But nonetheless, good morning to everyone who is joining us here today. So first of all, Jake, the fact that Stake.com has announced its shirt sponsorship of Everton. I know you are a big football fan, by the way, so I don't know how your feelings are about this in the first place, but can you go into this story a little bit and what has happened here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think everyone is at least knows the name Stake.com by now. They're a huge global operator that are probably the foremost crypto orientated casino brand. They're unregulated in a lot of territories because you can't bet on cryptocurrencies everywhere, including the UK actually, which is interesting. So they've signed a shirt deal with Everton, and they do have a stake.co.uk website, but you can't bet with crypto on there. It's more just a kind of a white label sports book, off the shelf, like a lot of other gambling operators do. But they've done it so they can sign lucrative sports sponsorship deals like the one that they've done with Everton. So the rumours are that they're paying Everton about £10 million a year to advertise on their shirt. But yeah, I mean, if you've seen the kind of money that they're rumored to be paying Drake, the Canadian rapper, who's one of their biggest brand ambassadors, then 10 million a year, probably is pocket change to them, especially when you hear the rumors of their global revenue as well, which is a couple of people have said it could even rival Bet365. Probably far beyond that now, to be honest with you. There's not any way of monitoring it. Yeah, what were your thoughts on this deal, Pierre? I mean, for me, it's the interesting thing is the timing, and that an English club has decided to go all in on a gambling sponsorship when they're pretty much going to be banned. We think. The Daily Mail has already come out and blasted this deal as tone deaf, and I think the expectation is that football sponsorships, certainly in the Premier League, which Everton have always been in, are going to be banned. Whether it's this season or not, we'll see. But we saw a similar thing in Italy as well, where basically we knew sponsorships were going to be banned, but you still had operators and clubs trying to push them through at the last minute so they can say, oh, well, we'll see out this contract and then we can change. Yeah. But yeah, it certainly goes against the tide in the UK. A lot of other clubs have pulled away from gambling. But no, Everton are going all in, obviously, because the commercial ramifications are fantastic for a club of their size. Yeah,
I had a conversation with someone a while ago, because the discussion often on the US side of things is who's going to win amongst the operators on the US market. Who's going to be the biggest operator in the next 3 years, let's say, and is it going to be DraftKings, is it going to be Flutter, Caesars, or someone else, perhaps Fanatics when they decide to launch their B2C? And someone was asked this question, and the answer was the biggest operator in the US market in 3 years' time is going to be Stake.com, which is a bit of a controversial statement, I suppose, because Stake.com is obviously not regulated in that market, but as a crypto casino, that is the let's say the fact of the matter is that they are quite active in that market, and I think they launched at some point in like 2017, Stake.com, or 2018, somewhere along those lines. So it's a quite
2017
late. Yeah, it's a quite late newcomer to the game, but obviously Stake.com has just absolutely exploded onto the scene, and they are run by a quite young C-suite team over there who understands the power of kind of modern influencer marketing when it comes to streaming, using video, using influencers, and they have just basically succeeded in that type of marketing and affiliation better than anyone else. And Stake obviously has been very aggressive. As you pointed out here in the beginning, the most kind of prolific the sponsorship that they have done to date is with Drake, of course, the American rapper, who's a massive partner and a massive part of the success in Stake.com, who's rumored to be paid 9 figures a year. But also a lot of other streamers on Twitch specifically have partnered with Stake.com against this kind of like massive rumored sponsorship deals that they are getting in return, and also sponsorship with. They have been very active on the UFC front as well. They are a big sponsor of UFC, Israel Adesanya, Jose Aldo, and so on and so forth. The question. I mean, the question is, to some extent, Stake.com is like the industry's dirty secret to some point almost. they are operating in kind of the crypto environment, unregulated environment, and they have managed to grow to this size. The question is, as we go forward, like you point out there, the Daily Mail or whatnot is already calling this, tone deaf and so on. Maybe not only because it's an iGaming kind of operator, but just the profile of Stake.com perhaps as well. But it's quite interesting. You can't deny the fact that Stake.com has done things very well. At the end of the day, they are offering kind of the best product out there. They really are understanding what it means to build a good product, not just kind of the marketing side as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the product and like you say, the track record obviously speaks for itself. And I think you're right; they are going to be one of the biggest US operators. They probably are what they are now, and they certainly will be in years to come. The threat to them is probably regulation, but like it's worth pointing out that they don't care about England or the UK as an operating market. They want exposure because the Premier League is the biggest league in the world. So they're going after teams because their logo will be plastered on broadcasts in just about every country. And it's the big unregulated, profitable markets that they're after. So the US, Asia, where a lot of their customers will be betting on crypto. And if you remember the Evolution short seller report that we covered, one of the points of contention in that, where the analyst was saying that he doesn't think the share price of Evo is a true representation because of the unregulated risk. That included screenshots of Evolution games on a Stake.com website, and that was kind of used as a stick to beat them with. And I remember we had a number of discussions at the time about, whether that was fair to Evolution or not. They're only the supplier; they're not responsible. But so they're huge. They're working with all the biggest companies, all the biggest ambassadors. Sergio Aguero is another one, the former Manchester City and Barcelona striker. So unlimited pockets, I think, is probably the best way to describe Stake.com.
Yeah, exactly. And we have the question here as well from Edmonton. Are firms like Stake.com good for the iGaming industry? And I guess it depends on who you ask. If you ask the B2B providers and the game studios, I think they would say yes, because obviously
Or
Stake.com is or Drake as well. He would also say yes, or Everton, and the kind of direct beneficiaries of Stake.com obviously are very happy for what they contribute and so on and so forth. But I think it shouldn't be ignored, the fact that they are operating in unregulated environments, and question marks relation to responsible gambling. The way Drake, for example, promotes Stake.com is quite questionable when it comes to responsible gambling. Responsible
exactly,
gambling,
because it's not his own money that he's gambling with.
It's not his own money he's gambling with.
That's the big accusation,
yeah, and also looking at the advertisement and kind of how Drake is profiling himself and his gambling activities is very much like you're just a winner, like you showcase the wins, but not exactly the other side of the coin. And this is what Ed points out here as well: the short term versus the long term outcomes. And on the European side of the fence, we've seen that type of marketing activity play out, where operators have been able to, with very aggressive marketing campaigns, gain short-term revenue, but have been paying for that with long-term headwinds in terms of like regulatory backlash and just the backlash from the public in general. The upcoming gambling review, obviously, we have ahead of us here, and in Sweden, obviously, we're already seeing the regulation play out, the Netherlands, Germany, and so on. And the question is, in the US market, how things will play out. The US market doesn't tend to protect the consumers as much as the US market protects the big corporations. This is kind of the culture there, right? It's more kind of every man for himself to some extent. So I think the big question, which is kind of, it's a hot debate over in the US at the moment, is this kind of aggressive marketing eventually going to come back to bite the industry? And obviously the regulators, the regulated operators are keen for operators to Stake.com to obviously be shut down and disappear. Yeah, that's the best way to put it, because at the end of the day, the regulated operators are paying tax, and that's at the end of the day what the regulators want as well, to this extent. So
and also thinking about it from a customer point of view, the big difference between an unregulated and a regulated operator is, number one, the transparency, obviously, but also the customer protection protocols. If you don't get paid out by an unregulated bookmaker, who's going to do anything about it? Whereas if you don't buy a regulated bookmaker, there are certain channels that you have a legal basis to pursue. I think obviously we're in a business industry and it's easy to talk about the business of it, but we should also keep the end customer in mind. But then again, the question becomes about product. And like we've seen this with bonusing, haven't we? When bonuses get turned into nothing in markets like Sweden, for example, the players that want bonuses will look offshore. They'll look outside of the regulated environment. And that's always going to be a thing that's happening, and there are always going to be operators that are willing to take that risk and capitalize on it. And Stake.com is probably doing that better than anybody else at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I don't know about you, Jake, but I'm getting the feeling, and this is, we've hosted some networking events recently, and I've been speaking to a couple of people on the operator side, and the feeling is very much that, honestly, like the tides are turning a bit in the industry, where in the last couple of years it's been this drive towards regulated markets and operators wanting to kind of focus on regulated revenue and the growth through regulated markets and newly regulated markets. But the feeling I'm having is that the tides are turning to some extent, where it's very difficult to operate in many of the regulated markets, and operators are looking more towards the gray side of the industry again, over in Asia, which is South America, so on and so forth. And yeah, it's a tough environment, obviously, to take Kindred as a good example here, which is has set out the target that they want to derive all the revenue from regulated markets, and compare that to Betsson, for example, who have not made those type of commitments. Even though Kindred is still bigger than Betsson, in the last couple of quarterly reports, obviously Betsson is performing positively through kind of the growth of the gray markets over in South America, whereas Kindred's regulated market approach has turned out not to work yet. And so the question is like, is the regulated markets only for the top tier 1 operators, whereas the tier 2 to 3s will be more and more forced to derive, a larger amount of their revenue from pre-regulated markets, essentially.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and obviously there's different things to weigh up for operators, whether they're private or public. But yes. Yeah, you talk about Betsson. I mean, Alan Bowden, who in my opinion is probably the leading commentator on the gambling industry, made an interesting point the other day where he said, if you're just moving on to the next regulating or unregulated market to drive the bottom line and pick the share price up, there's a danger that you're never going to focus on the underlying issues in your business that are causing it to stagnate, like because you're just going for the next shiny thing on the board, basically. Yeah. Which territory can we go to next because it's easy money? You're not actually improving internal processes to make everything, to fix things, basically, yeah. Which I think Kindred are doing, and they're having obviously a very hard time of it now, which might explain why more aren't going down that route. But it was an interesting question nonetheless, I thought.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back to Ed's sentiment here with short-term versus long-term outcomes, essentially, and the operators need to decide who they want to be at the end of the day, I think. But ever-changing landscape and ever-changing trends in the industry, that's for sure. Which kind of leads us to the next point here, I think, as well, Jake, which is, I would say, the main story of the week. The fact that LeoVegas offices were searched by the Swedish Economic Police Unit a couple of days ago in relation to possible insider trading in regards to the bid that MGM has put forward to acquire LeoVegas. And I just wanted to kind of start off here in the kind of month and a half that led up to this bid being announced. We'll have a look at the share price here of a couple of the traditional Swedish operators, so LeoVegas, Betsson, and Kindred. So as you can see here, in the month and a half leading up to the bid of LeoVegas, the share price increased by 24.5%. And if we compare that to, for example, Betsson actually increased their share price by 13%. And Kindred, a bit more erratic on the stock market, they decreased the share value by 6.4%. But sorry, this is kind of a little bit the background here to the suspicion of possible insider trading within LeoVegas. If you imagine, it must be very difficult to kind of negotiate a deal like this as two public companies, because a company like LeoVegas, how many people would be aware of a negotiation with MGM taking place during this time? I mean, it must be at least 10 people, let's say, and then plus the broker and various lawyers that are involved in this type of M&A activity as well. And then you have on the MGM side of the fence where obviously a massive team, an executive leader team behind that company, more rigorous process and decision making. So let's say that there is in total maybe 60 or 70 people who would be aware of this type of negotiation taking place. And then obviously everyone has a wife, everyone has a husband, everyone has a best friend. And so in these type of negotiation processes, it must be very difficult to keep these discussions silent, and it's enough that just kind of one person start talking about a deal like this taking place to their best friend, for example, and then that friend mention it to someone else, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of spreads like wildfire here. So I suppose this is a little bit the background here to what happened. But Jake, I know that kind of the mainstream media was reporting this as a police raid, but that's not exactly what happened, right?
Yeah, I don't think it was a raid in the sense of you imagine guys in FBI sort of Rainmaker jackets storming a building. I think it was probably the polite Swedish version. So they did turn up unannounced, which it showed this is a big deal, whichever way you look at it. LeoVegas didn't know about the visit from the crime authority beforehand, and they obviously have reasonable cause to believe they can search the building in regards to this alleged insider trading. And like I said, we don't know much about the details. Both the crime authority and LeoVegas have been very guarded public statements that they're putting out. But if you're MGM looking at this from America, and that deal, they get cold feet and this deal goes cold as a result of this, that's absolutely huge from an operational perspective. We already know that US operators, certainly the big public casino guys, are sensitive to anything of this nature. They do their due diligence, especially on European companies that they're looking to acquire. We've seen it before. Certainly the regulators as well clamp down heavily on European operators that have maybe grey or unregulated market operations. It doesn't really wash very well at all in the US. And this is the same kind of thing. You're not going to want to acquire a company that is being investigated for, or potentially investigated for, alleged insider trading. And I think the official statement from LeoVegas, the wording of it is interesting to me as a journalist. So no employee, member in the management team, or board member in the company has been notified of any criminal suspicion. So it's quite to the point, and it looks to absolve them of kind of responsibility, reading it on first glance. But just because they haven't been notified doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't being investigated. And it doesn't mean that there aren't suspicions there that aren't criminal either. So, you could interpret that in a number of different ways. I don't want to pontificate too much right now because obviously there's a lot more that's going to come out of this story. But yeah, it's a big deal. Is my main takeaway. So yeah, that's the insight people come here for, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. And exactly. And I'm gonna take a quick screenshot here because also these type of news in general, they would because the deal has not been accepted yet by the shareholders, right?
And, it's been recommended, yeah, but they've not voted.
It's been recommended, and it hasn't been voted on as of yet. And usually, when kind of these type of news breaks, you'll see a reaction on the stock market where the shareholders puts in doubt if this deal is going to take place or not. But if we look at the share price here after the bid was announced, so this is in the last month essentially, we haven't really this news that broke a couple of days ago has not affected the share price at all. Essentially, what you're seeing here, even though the graph goes up and down, it's very small movements, essentially less than 1%, essentially. And what this alludes to is that the news story that broke is not really putting any doubt to the shareholders that this will put the deal in jeopardy.
Yeah, exactly. If the share price hasn't moved, then the investors aren't going to have the same hang-ups that I do. That like you say, it doesn't look like it's going to affect any.
Yeah, exactly. Thing. And we can compare that. Let me take a new screenshot. We can put that in comparison to Twitter, for example, where the deal is very much questioned if it's going to happen or not because of the controversy around Elon Musk and his statements, right? So Elon Musk has put a bid out there. The bid has been recommended to be accepted by the shareholders. But after this happened, there's been a lot of controversy, and here you can see that the share price has been jumping after the deal was announced on the 31st of March. It has been basically swinging, 10-20% on the markets, and basically shareholders are much more doubtful that this bid is actually going to be accepted at the end of the day, that this deal is actually going to happen. And I am a bit surprised that the share price of LeoVegas hasn't moved, that the shareholders of Leo are assuming that these are kind of non-existing news, that is not. But that's nonetheless, that is how the shareholders are reacting currently. So the shareholders are feeling that there is not anything of substance behind the story. Essentially, that's how they. And at the end of the day, people who put their money behind their opinions usually are worth more than just people's general opinion. They actually put the money on the line here. So if we are to trust the stock market, then this is kind of like not really that big of news, and especially not as big as the Swedish mainstream media made it out to be here a couple of days ago. But again, the fact still remains that the offices were searched by the financial crime unit in Sweden, and you would assume that it's more behind that search than just an uptick in share price in the month and a half leading up to the deal. Won't you think?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're an investor, you're going to want to ride this wave. A company that you're investing in is about to be acquired by a major player in the space. Those are the days that you look forward to. And I think you're right. Perhaps it's the fact that there haven't been any details to emerge that has kept the share price steady. But no, I mean, you're right. There aren't any concerns from investors if you're just looking at that graph. And well done for bringing those graphs to the audience on real time, by the way, Pierre.
yeah, we're learning
Impressive
every time. Yes, exactly. We have a deep investigative live work here taking place, essentially. So we have an interesting comment here from Robin Reed, who is saying that it's not on the company to excessively confine information. All who needs to know to do the job should know, and will be listed inside the registry. So that's what Robin is mentioning here is that anyone who is in the know of a deal like this taking place has to basically sign a paper as an insider registry. And in Sweden, the laws are very strict. And Robin can maybe confirm this because obviously he has gone through M&A activities before. But essentially, if you are an insider registry and you don't sign this paper, you can potentially face prison in Sweden. Not because you have done anything wrong or that you have committed insider trading per se, but you have not registered as an insider registry when a process like this is taking place. So the laws are very strict in Sweden. And maybe Robin can give some more insight here as well on how tight-knit a process like this is when the negotiation are taking place, or maybe perhaps if Robin were to guess how many people within LeoVegas or how many people within MGM and it's kind of the brokerage firms, the lawyers and so forth who would know about a deal like this taking place, it would be interesting to hear as well. But in any case, so Robin continues here. As long as the company is following the process, the lawyers are targeting the person entity that has the insider information to not trade. So what he's saying is targeting. So this is not exactly a case against LeoVegas specifically, but against the person who has committed insider trading, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
Interesting comment here as well. But again, we will follow this story, and
there's more work for us on this one for sure.
Yeah, and that could also explain the fact that I was speaking to someone from LeoVegas the other day who wasn't actually aware that the police had searched the offices of LeoVegas, and essentially LeoVegas hadn't mentioned this in an all-hands meeting, for example, or anything like this, and potentially that could be because it's not really targeting LeoVegas, and that's what the statement that they made as well, right? Is that no individual within LeoVegas is considered for a criminal investigation at the moment. But more to follow on that note for sure. Jumping over to the next topic here, Jake. The time is ticking here, and we have a couple of topics left to cover. Is the fact that Las Vegas Sands have announced the next investment in their portfolio, which is a company called Huddle. Now, I know, Jake, that you have some information on the company Huddle, what they do, and so on and so forth. But it's a $15 million investment that the Las Vegas Sands have committed to, and Las Vegas Sands is the biggest gambling company in the world with a market cap of something like 25 to 30 billion USD, and everyone since the passing of Sheldon Adelson, the legendary owner of Las Vegas Sands, have been expecting Las Vegas Sands to make a big statement in entering the iGaming space, but rather they have chosen a much more targeted investment strategy. Good friends of ours, the Las Vegas Sands, invested in Flows, that is headed by James King a while ago, and now they are announcing the investment into Huddle. And as Carolina Pelk points out there, she is conducting an interview with the CEO of Huddle here today, which will be released soon as well. But Jake, what's your story and insight here into this investment?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. There was obviously speculation when Sands said it was finally, after all these years, willing to explore online gaming, that they would make a kind of headline-grabbing acquisition that would kind of drag them from retail into online in one fell swoop, maybe with a huge gaming supplier or betting supplier. But yeah, their approach is really interesting, and obviously we've just talked about LeoVegas, and we've got Carolina commenting on the stream, and it's similar to LeoVegas's Leo Ventures strategy, certainly as I see it, where they kind of scour the gaming industry for really interesting startup businesses that fill a niche, an obvious niche that can help the company that's investing, but can also continue on their path as a B2B provider or supplier in the gaming space. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that they're not just looking at gaming either. They're obviously, they want to make a play in sports betting to some degree. And that's where Huddle comes in. But yeah, I think we need to be careful with the narrative around this, because, you could think Las Vegas Sands buying Huddle means, they're interested in US sports betting, but it doesn't work like that at all from what we know about this story. Huddle is very much going to remain a kind of European-centric sportsbook solutions provider, serving many of the regulated markets across Europe, and this strategic investment from Las Vegas Sands will help it to execute on that journey. Obviously, as part of this deal, Huddle has merged with a company called Deck Prism, which is a big US company that focuses North American odds. I don't know if that was a prerequisite to do with Sands' investment, or whether that was in the background for some time. But those two companies have merged together to provide it with a bit more US focus. And the new company is going to be called Huddle Tech Inc. But yeah, Huddle before it merged with Deck Prism is an interesting company. It was founded out of a company that was originally called SimpleBet, which was started several years ago, with a core focus on the US market and betting markets or another.
Let's see. I think we lost Jake there slightly, or it could be my internet as well. That's a bit so. We'll see if we get Jake to come back here in the live stream. But in the meantime, we can continue on this discussion a bit until Jake is sorting out his internet issues here. But the fact of the matter, like I said, the interesting part of the story, in my opinion, with Las Vegas Sands doing these targeted investments is that they are choosing a similar strategy as, for example, Drive by DraftKings, the fund that DraftKings has launched, and in addition to that as well. LeoVegas, obviously, with their Gears of Leo, their own investment fund, which is focusing again on this targeted investment. One of the investments of Gears of Leo is, of course, the Carolina Pelk's Beyond Play here, and a similar strategy is chosen here by the likes of Las Vegas Sands. There's been expectations and rumors that Las Vegas Sands will be looking at like major M&A activity, like the likes of Evolution, for example, which would be a huge investment opportunity like that. But obviously, that has not been the case yet. Let's see here. I think Jake, do we have you back here? I think the internet is a little bit so. Oh, and sorry, Carolina, you point out here very rightly that Gears of Leo is the tech hub. It's Leo Ventures, which is the investment arm of LeoVegas here. But Jake, let's give it another try here. You mentioned that the company has rebranded to SimpleBet, and SimpleBet essentially focus on these kind of micro betting transactions.
Yeah, that's how. So it didn't rebrand. Huddle was kind of born out of the company that was SimpleBet that didn't make it for one reason or another. But yeah, some of its leading executives, so Francesco Borgasano, who used to work for Cambi, and Leo Gaspar is another co-founder. They're kind of well known in the sports betting trading circles. Founded Huddle, and yeah, it's gone from strength to strength. And Las Vegas Sands, obviously, they like what they see. And yeah, it sounds like it's going to continue to be run at arm's length by Francesco and the new management team. And Sands won't interfere kind of too much. But yeah, fascinating to see who else Las Vegas Sands go on to invest in. And they'll probably make us look very silly now by putting in a multi-billion-pound bid for one of the major suppliers after we've just said all this between ourselves. But no, it looks to be a much smaller, much more targeted approach to M&A that one of their executives, Davis Catlin, who's a very experienced strategic investor, is overseeing. And yeah, it's a smart play. Some of these businesses will work, others, won't be what we thought they were going to be. But there's only one way to find out. And yeah, that $15 million investment will massively help a company like Huddle to achieve its strategic goals.
Exactly. And I want to just kind of nail down the point here a little bit on the fact that Las Vegas Sands is choosing this strategy of kind of targeted M&A activity. It doesn't necessarily move the needle of the share price. And looking at I think if you look at a company's historical share price, you will sometimes be able to predict the strategy moving forward. And so in Las Vegas Sands case, we can look here. This is a 10-year graph, okay? And as you can see from this graph, Jake, is the fact that the share price of Las Vegas Sands is 20% lower today than it was 10 years ago. The shareholders of Las Vegas Sands are a bunch of people with a lot of patience, okay? Las Vegas Sands have not made any major steps into the iGaming industry, and the reason for that is that they were run by this kind of, would you say, legendary Sheldon Adelson, who founded Las Vegas Sands back in the day. He's one of these kind of Las Vegas pioneers who helped build Las Vegas to what it is, but he's also a fierce competitor to the online gambling movement. Let's say he was very fiercely opposed to the online gambling movement, and he's been successfully lobbying against the online gambling movement within the United States, and he's the main culprit to the fact that the United States is so late to the party. And he was also one of the major players behind Black Friday back in the day, when poker was blacklisted, so to say, online poker. Now, since his passing a couple of years ago, the expectation has very much been, and the statements from Las Vegas Sands has very much been, that they are now open to start looking at the online gambling sphere. And why I bring the share price up is because comparing the share price to, for example, MGM and Caesars, you saw a quite aggressive uptick during the pandemic, because MGM specifically was kind of seen as a leader into the pivot into online gambling as a casino, as a traditional casino operator, whereas Las Vegas Sands obviously did not make any big moves, so to say, in this space. And this is why I bring this up, because you would expect Las Vegas Sands to do some quite significant moves in order to provide shareholder value. And you would expect that the shareholders of Las Vegas Sands are putting pressure on Las Vegas Sands in order to deliver the shareholder value. And still, they are choosing this more targeted, careful, and so far quite kind of, I don't want to say insignificant, because the investments that they are making have the potential to become big. It's
Cool.
Cautious, yes, just based on the size of the Las Vegas Sands themselves. But targeted investments in companies like Flows, for example, is smart on one hand, because a company like Flows can obviously become huge. They have so much potential in that organization. But these investments are still small in comparison to the size of Las Vegas Sands, so they aren't moving the needle of the share price. And so I'm wondering, as we go forward, if this strategy is going to remain, or if they are going to make some bigger moves here in order to kind of move the needle on the share price, or if they basically take the strategy and position that we don't care about kind of quarter-to-quarter results. We are in it for the long term, and we are going to make the strategic investments that will pay off, in 3, 4, 5 years perhaps, and so on and so forth. But it's interesting, and it's definitely very unexpected to what everyone believed would be Las Vegas Sands' strategy in the M&A activity in the online gambling industry.
Yeah, and there may well be a separate business arm at Las Vegas Sands that is exploring kind of transformative M&A, but we haven't seen any evidence of that yet. I mean, yeah. I remember last week we were talking about Kambi and the potential for Kambi to be acquired, and Las Vegas Sands were inevitably one of the operators that came up as a potential buyer. So it's always going to be linked, and I'm sure they are looking into it. But yeah, at the moment it's a lot more small fry, shall we say?
Yes. Onto the next story here, Jake, is one of the winners on the stock market in the last week has been Kindred, and you can see here a quite aggressive spike the other day that happened on the 7th, I believe on Wednesday, when the announcement came that Kindred had finally secured a license into the Netherlands market, and the expectation is here within days they will be operating within the Netherlands market again. So Jake, can you give a little bit insight here into the announcement here, and what does it mean for Kindred to be active in the Netherlands market again?
Yeah, of course. So Kindred were one of hundreds of operators that were operating in the Netherlands while it was still an unregulated market, and they were, their services were available to Dutch consumers. And then the Dutch legislators decided they wanted to regulate the market, like a lot of other places in Europe have done, Sweden, for example, in 2019. And that meant that operators who wanted a license had to obviously apply. And some operators who had previously been targeting Dutch consumers had to pull out of their market, withdraw their services, and wait patiently to reapply for a license, and Kindred was obviously granted that license this week, which is a major strategic milestone for them. The Netherlands was a huge market for them in comparison to a lot of competitors. To put that into perspective, I think when they withdrew their services, it led to a negative EBITDA impact of around 12 million euros a month, which is a lot. And sort of 30% of total group EBITDA was missing as a result of withdrawing from the Netherlands, and that's been in the share price for a long time. But I think you're right. The thing that surprised both me and you, Pierre, was that it has been well flagged for some time now that Kindred was kind of hanging its hat on a return to the Netherlands around this time of the year. So this shouldn't have come as a surprise to investors. But the share price did jump. I mean, it's back. It kind of is back down to normalized levels now. If there's any such thing as normalized during this time, but yeah, did that take you by surprise? The kind of investor reaction to this. I mean, obviously Henrik's been saying for a while now that they expected a kind of Q2 relaunch ahead of the likes of Betsson and Entain, which are still waiting for their Dutch licenses to come back.
Yeah, it did take me by surprise, especially considering that the share price had already jumped on the back of the fact that the bid from MGM was announced. That MGM announced a bid to acquire LeoVegas, which then sparked discussions and rumors that Kindred would also
Kindred would be next.
Kindred would be next essentially, and these are not unfounded rumors because some of the major shareholder published a letter essentially urging the Kindred board to look for a potential buyer in this environment. So that caused obviously a jump in the share price, and it caused actually the share price to jump 24% in total. And it came down a little bit after that announcement. We haven't heard anything after that. And then obviously the spike here of 10% yesterday. The news are not unexpected, but the shareholders kind of treated it as unexpected news. But I think the most important thing to remember here, shareholder, and perhaps this is the reason of this kind of knee-jerk reaction to some extent, is the fact that it's not like Kindred is regaining its 30% EBITDA as they are launching again. Not only do they have to kind of reactivate their players, but they are not able to use the database that they have accumulated in the Netherlands market. This is part of the license requirements, essentially, that after this cool down period, that when Kindred now go live again, they have to start from scratch. They are not allowed to use the email addresses and the database or the names or anything that they have accumulated over the last 20 years, essentially, in the Netherlands market. So they start from zero. They start from scratch, and they have to go the traditional marketing routes in order to acquire the players anew. Old accounts have to be they have to be re-signed. So any old player that had an account at Unibet have to sign up a new account, and they have to go through the KYC process just like any other player would. And so you would expect that it's going to take time for Kindred to build a database. It's going to take time for Kindred to become profitable in the Netherlands market, and add on top of that the fact that they have to pay tax on the revenue that they generate. And you quickly realize that the story in the Netherlands is not as exciting as it used to be for Kindred.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on, Pierre. And the other thing to consider is that a lot of its competitors have been live in the market since the 3rd of October. So they've had, a really significant head start. And these aren't kind of just localized companies either. This includes international operators like Bet365 who are going to be sweeping up these customers, like nobody's business. I think the good thing for Kindred is that the Unibet brand is really strong in the Netherlands, always has been historically in the kind of Benelux region. And I think there will be consumers in that market who have kind of missed it and will log straight back in. But yeah, how that affects the bottom line, it's going to take some time it's going to take a long time to get back to pre-regulation levels. So looking forward to the quarterly results. It might be too soon, but
yes, yeah, I'm very excited as well to see how the efforts are going to go in the Netherlands market, because while we are being negative now toward Kindred to some extent, Kindred have proven time and time again the efficiency in operating in difficult markets. Kindred are able to be profitable in the UK market, in Sweden, in the Nordics in general, and if anyone can turn this around in the Netherlands and surprise everyone, it would be Kindred, in my opinion. They have shown themselves time and time again. So it will be interesting to see for sure how this is going to play out revenue-wise for Kindred in the coming quarterly reports, for sure. We only have a couple of minutes left here, Jake, but I suppose we can just quickly dive into the story of the very controversial Dan Bilzerian, because it's always interesting for sure. So Dan Bilzerian has now been ousted essentially as an ambassador from GG Poker, and it's been not for the reasons that you would expect, or at least not that's the public perception. What Dan Bilzerian himself is saying is that it was basically a disappointment from his side that he has been kind of generating a lot of traffic for GG Poker. He's been generating a lot of signed up players and so on and so forth, and he hasn't been paid his affiliation commission as he was promised, essentially. But it shouldn't be ignored, the fact that Dan Bilzerian has caused quite a lot of controversy as a GG Poker ambassador, not to say the least, with a tweet towards one of the other GG Poker ambassadors, who basically, when the announcement was made that Dan Bilzerian had become one of the GG Poker ambassadors, a tweet by Vanessa Cade, who is a professional poker player, expressed her disappointment that the GG Poker went down the route of basically signing up this, Dan Bilzerian, who is very controversial and obviously a massive kind of on the sexism front, and is not seen as something that is positive to society. And Dan Bilzerian put flames on the fire with his reply here to Vanessa Cade, and the response from GG Poker to this tweet by Dan Bilzerian was essentially to say that we are aware that this tweet is not optimal, that is not great, and we are trying to basically turn this into some positive discussions, but they did not let Dan Bilzerian go, which is kind of showcasing the strategy of GG Poker, is that they don't really care about the morality of hiring someone like Dan Bilzerian. They are just interested to sign up players, so to say. And as things often go with these kind of short-term decisions, it comes back to bite you in the end. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. This was a surprise to absolutely no one. And like you just posted, they had the perfect opportunity to cut ties previously, and they should have taken it because it's come back to bite them now. And yeah, I mean, there's a number of reasons we've heard. Like, one is that he basically just didn't bother trying to promote GG Poker or the site, which is kind of your main responsibility as a brand ambassador. Yeah. So yeah, I think they'll just be glad to see the back of it. But it was just such a PR own goal to begin with, that I wonder if they'll think it was worth the effort. Obviously, that will depend on how many customers they've been able to acquire cheaply thanks to joining forces with Dan Bilzerian. But I'm of the feeling that you've got to be more careful about who you want to align brand with, especially considering the reputation gambling has as a sector in general anyway. There's a similar thing happening with Barstool Sportsbook in the US, and Dave Portnoy, who's another kind of controversial figure with some backward thoughts about women and that sort of thing. But it's a cheap acquisition strategy for operators if they choose to partner with ambassadors who have huge social media followings and can basically funnel customers in for very low acquisition rates. So yeah, it's how much of that risk you're willing to take and what the rewards are, but it can come back to hurt you, as we've seen with GG Poker, who should have been at a gate in that previous argument.
Absolutely, yeah, very, very controversial, and I think at the end of the day here, the only ones that's hurt here is GG Poker at the end of the day, and that is the kind of risk-reward decision that you have to take when you bring on board this very controversial figures. They can bring short-term revenue, but as in the case of GG Poker, it can also end up hurting your brand, and that's what ended up happening here. Jake, it's been an absolutely brilliant hour. We are over time. We did not have time to go through all the agenda today, and I think that's a good sign of a good discussion here. It's been great to have the kind of vibrant discussion in the chat here as well, and as Ed Mountain point out here, profitability over principle, which is the mindset of GG Poker when they signed Bilzerian. But nonetheless, it's been great to be with you here today, Jake. Excellent job on covering these stories, of course, throughout the week. And like always, we'll be back here every single week. I think from next week, actually, we're gonna change from Fridays to Thursdays, because we think that the Fridays sometimes can be good to kind of switch off the computer and enjoy the summer a little bit here. So we're going to start covering these topics on Thursdays instead from now on out, essentially. So for those of you guys who joined us today, thank you so much. Jake, thank you as well. We'll see each other later on in the day here as we continue working on iGaming Next and the next stories that are yet to be unfolded. And have a good day, Jake. I'll see you later.
Yeah, my pleasure, Pierre. Thanks to everyone for viewing and listening.